I'm Vanessa Clark. I was once diagnosed as infertile, slapped, abandoned, and left Boston with nothing but a suitcase. But I came back, not just to reclaim my life, but to bring down an entire dynasty with nothing more than truth and unshakable resilience. Before I share the full journey with you, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you've ever fought through adversity to protect your family. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. The fertility specialist's office smelled like lavender and broken dreams. I'd been in this exact chair 17 times over 3 years, but something about today felt different. Dr. Chen's face held that careful neutrality medical professionals perfect when delivering life-altering news. "Vanessa, the tests are conclusive," she said, sliding the ultrasound images across her mahogany desk. "The childhood surgery you had at 7, it resulted in what we call an infantile uterus. Your chances of carrying a pregnancy to term are less than 3%. 3%? I watched Brandon's hand slide away from mine like water finding its level. No squeeze of comfort, no reassuring touch, just absence where warmth used to be. "There must be options," I heard myself say, though my voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else entirely, someone who still believed in miracles. Dr. Chen launched into alternatives: surrogacy, adoption, IVF with donor eggs, but Brandon had already checked out. His jaw set in that way I'd seen when he reviewed bad quarterly reports at his real estate firm. This was a business decision now. I was a failed investment. The drive home stretched endless through Boston traffic. Brandon's Audi hummed with unspoken verdicts. I pressed my forehead against the cool window, watching happy families push strollers through Boston Common. When had I become the woman on the outside looking in? "We need to talk," Brandon finally said as we pulled into our Beacon Hill brownstone. But we didn't talk. Not really. His mother, Loretta, arrived within the hour, her Chanel suit as armor-plated as her expression. She swept into our living room like she owned it, which, technically, she did. "Brandon told me," she announced, settling onto our leather sofa with practiced elegance. "It's unfortunate, but we must be practical." I stood there in my own home, feeling like a trespasser. "Practical?" Loretta's smile could have frozen hell. "A woman who can't bear children isn't a wife, dear. She's a companion at best. The Lowell line must continue." The words hit like physical blows. I looked to Brandon, waiting for him to defend me, to remind his mother of the vows we'd exchanged in Trinity Church just 4 years ago. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. He studied his hands. That night, as I folded laundry in our bedroom, Brandon entered and closed the door with deliberate care. His face held an expression I'd never seen, cold calculation mixed with something darker. "I want a divorce," he said simply. The shirt in my hands fell to the floor. "Because I can't have children?" "Because you lied." His voice rose. "You knew about that surgery. You should have told me before we married." "I was 7 years old. I had no idea it would—" The slap came so fast, I didn't see it. Just felt the sharp bloom of pain across my cheek, tasted copper where my teeth cut the inside of my mouth. We both stood frozen, the violence hanging between us like a third presence. "You've stolen 3 years of my life," he said quietly, adjusting his cufflinks like nothing had happened. "Mother's lawyer will send papers tomorrow." Strange, the details you remember when your world implodes. The way moonlight caught on our wedding photo, the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the lavender lotion I'd smoothed on my hands an hour earlier when I still believed we'd weather this storm together. Brandon left for his study. I touched my cheek, felt the heat radiating from the handprint he'd left. Just last night, he'd traced that same cheek with gentle fingers, murmured, "I love you," against my hair as we drifted to sleep. I packed a single suitcase, taking only what I'd brought into this marriage: my grandmother's pearl necklace, the leather journal where I wrote my lectures, a photograph of my father, the renowned lawyer who'd died believing his daughter had found her happily ever after. As I wheeled my suitcase down the stairs, I passed the fertility medication still sitting on the kitchen counter. hundreds of dollars worth of hope in small glass vials. I left them there. Monuments to the family that would never be. The Uber driver didn't comment on my tear-stained face or the way my hands shook as I gave him my friend Zoe's address. Boston's city lights blurred past the window, each one a small goodbye to the life I thought I'd built. The diagnosis hadn't just revealed my medical condition. It had exposed the fatal flaw in my marriage. I'd loved a man who saw me as a means to an end, not an end in herself. Zoe opened her apartment door at midnight without questions. That's the thing about best friends who work labor and delivery. They understand that life's biggest moments don't follow business hours. "Oh, honey," she whispered, taking in my swollen cheek and single suitcase. She pulled me inside, wrapping me in the kind of hug that makes you feel human again. Her Jamaica Plain apartment smelled like coffee and the vanilla candles she burned to wash away hospital antiseptic. I collapsed on her futon, the same one where we'd studied for law school entrance exams a lifetime ago, before I chose academia. And she chose healing. "Brandon?" she asked, though we both knew the answer. "His mother says women who can't have children aren't really wives." The words tasted bitter. He agreed. Zoe cursed creatively in 3 languages, a skill from her Dominican grandmother. She pressed a bag of frozen peas against my cheek, and we sat in silence while Boston slept around us. The next 6 weeks blurred together. Days teaching contract law to bright-eyed students, nights crying into Zoe's shoulder. Brandon's lawyer served papers at my office, a final humiliation in front of colleagues. I signed them without reading, wanting it over. Then came the morning that changed everything. I'd been feeling off, exhausted beyond reason, nauseated by my usual coffee. Zoe, ever the nurse, insisted on running tests at her clinic. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the blood work twice. "What?" She turned from the computer, eyes wide. "Vanessa, you're pregnant. Not just pregnant, your HCG levels indicate multiples." The room tilted. "That's impossible. Dr. Chen said 3% isn't 0. Zoe grabbed my hands. "Medicine isn't magic. Sometimes bodies surprise us." Twins. Natural conception against all odds. The irony tasted like copper pennies and hope. My first instinct was to call Brandon. My fingers found his number, muscle memory of 4 years of marriage. But he'd blocked me. I tried his office, but his secretary, who'd sent me birthday flowers just months ago, informed me Mr. Lowell wasn't accepting my calls. Desperate, I drove to Loretta's Brookline mansion. The housekeeper who'd served me tea dozens of times looked through me like I was invisible. "Please," I begged. "I need to speak with Brandon. I'm pregnant." Loretta appeared at the door, her smile sharp as winter. "How convenient. Who's the father?" The accusation stole my breath. "Brandon is the only man I've ever—" "Security cameras show you arriving alone." She examined her manicure. "If you come here again, if you contact my son, if you breathe a word of this desperate lie to anyone, I'll bury you in legal fees. I'll make sure you never teach again. Massachusetts is a small state, dear. The Lowell name carries weight. These are Brandon's children. Prove it." Her laugh could have shattered glass. "After they're born, we'll demand paternity tests, court battles, custody evaluations. By the time you're done, those babies will be in college and you'll be bankrupt, or—" She paused for effect. "You disappear. Start fresh. We'll pretend this unfortunate chapter never happened." I drove away on autopilot, her threats echoing. At a red light, I pressed my hand against my still flat stomach. Twins. Brandon's children growing inside the body he'd deemed worthless. That night, Zoe found me surrounded by legal books, researching custody law with manic focus. "She's right," I admitted. "They have money, connections. I have nothing." "You have those babies," Zoe said firmly, "and you have options." She was right. I did have options, including one I'd forgotten about. In my father's old study, boxes I'd been avoiding since his death, I found the letter. His handwriting, formal as the man himself. "My dearest Vanessa, if you're reading this, someone has broken your trust profoundly. The account information below is yours alone. I pray you never need it. but a father protects his daughter, even from beyond. Use it to build the life you deserve. All my love, Dad. The account held more than I'd imagined. Not wealth, exactly, but enough. Enough to disappear. Enough to start over. Enough to protect two innocent lives from the family that had already rejected them. I touched my stomach again, whispering to the impossibilities growing inside me. It's just us now, but we're going to be enough. Zoe helped me research cities. Somewhere close enough to access good medical care, but far enough to build new dreams. New Haven called to me, halfway between my old life and whatever came next. I'd been diagnosed as broken, discarded as worthless. But sometimes the things that break us reveal strengths we never knew we had. Sometimes 3% is all the miracle you need. New Haven tasted like freedom and fear. I rented a tiny apartment above a Lebanese bakery where the smell of fresh pita masked my morning sickness. The elderly owner, Mrs. Haddad, took one look at my swelling belly and started leaving containers of lentil soup outside my door. Days, I worked at Thornton and Associates, a legal aid clinic specializing in domestic violence cases. The irony wasn't lost on me, helping women escape the men who'd hurt them while nursing my own invisible bruises. Nights, I attended Harvard Law School, commuting to Cambridge for their part-time program. My father's gift making the impossible merely difficult. The twins made their presence known with violent kicks during constitutional law. I'd excuse myself to the bathroom, pressing my hands against the rolling movements, whispering promises. Just let Mama finish this semester. We're building something here. At 28 weeks, a stabbing pain doubled me over during property law. The professor, a woman who'd never smiled in recorded history, drove me to the hospital herself. Preterm labor, the doctor announced. Bed rest or you'll deliver within days. I laughed. Actually laughed. I have finals. I have work. You have twins who need more time, she interrupted. What's your support system? Support system. Brandon had been my support system. Now I had a semester to complete, bills to pay, and two babies determined to arrive early. That's when Rafael Moreno entered my story. He appeared at my hospital bedside the next morning, all unruly dark hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'm your TA for property law, he explained, setting down a stack of books. Professor Williams said you might need help staying current. I can't pay for tutoring. His smile was crooked, genuine. Who said anything about payment? We're colleagues. This is what we do. For 3 weeks, Raphael appeared daily. He'd teach from my hospital doorway, turning complex property transactions into bedtime stories for the twins. He never asked about their father, never questioned why I was alone, just showed up with case law and Cuban coffee from his grandmother's recipe. Why are you helping me? I asked one evening as he explained future interests for the 3rd time. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous tell I'd noticed. My mother raised me alone. Cleaned offices while studying for her citizenship test. Someone helped her once. Maybe this is how I pay it forward. Week 31 arrived with November snow and contractions that wouldn't stop. The twins came screaming into the world, Elias first, then Silas 2 minutes later. 3 pounds each of perfect possibility. The NICU became my second home. I'd pump breast milk between case briefs, sing lullabies while memorizing torts. Raphael brought my assignments, never complaining when I fell asleep mid-sentence. They're beautiful, he said once, watching my boys through the incubator glass. They have your fight. They have their father's eyes, I replied without thinking. Raphael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then their father is a fool. He didn't know how right he was. The boys came home on Christmas Eve, each barely 5 pounds. Mrs. Haddad had decorated my apartment with lights that made everything glow. A note on my door read, "Welcome home, little princes. Your New Haven family." I sat in the second-hand rocking chair, a baby in each arm, and cried. Not from sadness, but from something fiercer. These boys would never question their worth, would never beg for scraps of love from people incapable of giving it. Spring semester started with me wearing Elias in a front carrier while Silas napped in his car seat beside my desk. My property law professor, the one who'd driven me to the hospital, personally approved the arrangement. Any student who maintains a 3.8 GPA while raising twins alone can bring those babies to my class, she announced, daring anyone to object. Raphael helped without being asked. He'd appear with groceries when my fridge grew empty, hold a fussy baby during study group. Once, I found him in my apartment. Mrs. Haddad had let him in, assembling the cribs I'd been too exhausted to tackle. "You don't have to do this," I said, watching him wrestle with incomprehensible instructions. "I know." He didn't look up. "But maybe I want to." There was something in his voice, a weight that suggested his own ghosts. But we didn't push. We existed in this careful dance of kindness without expectations, building something I couldn't yet name. Finals week arrived with spring flowers and possibilities. I submitted my last exam with one hand while nursing Silas with the other. Elias slept against my chest, tiny fist wrapped around the pearl necklace that had been his great-grandmother's. I'd entered law school as Vanessa Lowell, desperate to save a dying marriage. I was leaving as Vanessa Clark, mother, survivor, and woman who'd learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what matters. The twins and I were writing our own story now. No Lowell name needed. 3 years transformed us all. The twins grew from premature miracles into whirlwind toddlers who approached life like tiny attorneys, questioning everything, negotiating constantly. "But Why" became our household soundtrack. I'd graduated Harvard Law with honors, nursing babies between bar exam sections. Now I ran the Women's Justice Initiative from a narrow office in downtown New Haven, helping mothers navigate custody battles designed to break them. My clients saw themselves in me. The exhaustion, the determination, the fierce love that turns women into warriors. Raphael had become our constant. Sunday dinners at his apartment where his grandmother taught the boys Spanish through cooking. He never pushed for more than friendship, though sometimes I caught him looking at me with an expression that made my chest tight. We existed in comfortable limbo, building family from chosen pieces. Everything changed with the Morrison case. Diana Morrison, beaten for 7 years, gaslit by a husband with deep pockets and deeper connections. He wanted full custody of their daughter, the kind of case that made headlines and enemies. "He owns judges?" Diana whispered in my office, her daughter coloring quietly beside her. "His family's firm basically runs Hartford." I thought of Loretta's threats, of power wielded like weapons against women who dared inconvenience powerful men. "Then we'll make it too public to bury." The case consumed months, late nights building arguments while the twins slept. Raphael watching the boys when court ran long. Slowly, methodically, we exposed patterns of abuse the Morrison money had hidden. The media loved it. David versus Goliath with a feminist twist. When we won, Diana sobbed in my arms. Her daughter would stay with her. Safety assured. The precedent set. The Hartford Courant ran my photo on the front page. Yale lecturer revolutionizes custody law. They'd gotten the school wrong, but the message spread. Within days, my office phone rang nonstop. Women from across New England, desperate for someone who understood. That's how Loretta Lowell found me again. "Interesting work you're doing." Her voice slithered through my office phone one Tuesday. I'd answered without checking caller ID, a mistake. My hand trembled. "How did you—" "Oh, Vanessa. Did you think changing cities made you invisible? Though I must admit I'm impressed. From discarded wife to crusading attorney. Very American dream." "What do you want?" Her laugh hadn't warmed in 3 years. "Just calling to congratulate you, and to remind you that Brandon is happy now. Engaged to Senator Morrison's daughter. Yes, that Morrison. Your little case caused quite the family upset. Still, the wedding will be magnificent. December 15th at the Ritz-Carlton in Georgetown." December 15th. The twins' birthday. "I hope you've told your bastards their father is dead. Easier than explaining he simply doesn't care." The line went dead. I sat frozen, rage and pain braiding together in my chest. 3 years of building, and one phone call could still gut me. But I wasn't the same woman who'd fled Boston. I had work that mattered, children who called me mama with voices full of trust, a life stitched together from broken pieces but whole nonetheless. That night, I found Elias crying in his bed. "What's wrong, baby?" He climbed into my lap, all knobby knees and desperate cuddles. "Jake at school says everyone has a daddy. Do I have a daddy?" Silas appeared in the doorway, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Yeah, where's our daddy?" I'd prepared for this moment, but words scattered like startled birds. How do you explain abandonment to 3-year-olds? How do you protect them from rejection they didn't earn? "Some daddies live with their children," I said carefully. "Some live far away, and some weren't ready to be daddies." "Is he dead?" Silas asked with preschooler bluntness. "No, baby, he's just somewhere else." Elias studied my face with Brandon's eyes, the only inheritance his father had left. Did he not love us? The question shattered me. I pulled both boys close, breathing in their little boy smell of peanut butter and playground dirt. "That's his loss, not yours. You are the most lovable boys in the entire universe. Some people just don't know how to love right." They accepted this with the resilience of children, already moving on to negotiations about tomorrow's breakfast. But I lay awake all night, Loretta's words echoing. December 15th. Brandon starting fresh with a senator's daughter while his sons wondered why they weren't enough. For 3 years, I'd built walls around that hurt. Professional success, personal growth, a carefully constructed life that didn't include Brandon Lowell. But my boys deserved truth, even if it hurt. They deserved to know where they came from, to make their own choices about the man who'd helped create them. I pulled up the wedding announcement online. Brandon smiled from the screen, unchanged. The accompanying article gushed about the power couple and their fairy tale romance. No mention of a first wife. As if I'd never existed. But I had existed. We all had. And maybe it was time to stop letting the Lowells pretend otherwise. December arrived with unusual warmth, as if the universe itself conspired to make traveling easier. I stood in my bedroom, staring at the black dress laid across my bed. Simple, elegant, the opposite of the desperate woman Loretta expected. "You're really doing this?" Zoe asked over FaceTime. She'd moved to Chicago, but our friendship survived on late-night calls and shared worry. The boys deserved to know I tried. I smoothed the fabric, remembering another life when I'd had closets full of designer clothes. They can't grow up wondering if they weren't worth fighting for. "And Raphael?" I glanced toward the living room where he was building Lego castles with the twins, their laughter bright as Christmas lights. Sweet, steady Raphael, who'd never pushed, never demanded, just existed in our orbit like a patient planet. I told him he thinks I'm insane. But he's watching the boys anyway. He always does. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Pearl earrings, my grandmother's. The black dress that made me look like the attorney I'd become, not the broken woman I'd been. I kissed my sleeping boys, inhaling their sweet breath, memorizing their peaceful faces. Raphael waited by the door with coffee and worry. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "I'm not proving anything to them," I said. "I'm proving something to myself." The drive to D.C. took 6 hours, time enough to question everything, to remember Brandon's hand sliding away from mine in the doctor's office, his mother's voice. "A woman who can't bear children isn't a wife." Except I had borne children, 2 perfect boys who sang in their sleep and asked endless questions about dinosaurs. Boys who deserved more than a father who'd erased them for convenience. The Ritz-Carlton stood like a monument to old money and older traditions. I valeted my sensible Honda between Mercedes and Bentleys, chin high despite the stairs. Inside, Washington's elite mingled in a marble lobby draped with white roses and delusions. I found the Morrison Lowell wedding easily, the largest ballroom, the most security. I gave the door attendant my real name, watching his face shift from professional welcome to confusion. "I'm sorry, Ms. Clark, but I don't see you on the guest list. That's Dr. Clark, I corrected gently. And I'm not a guest. I'm here on legal business regarding Mr. Lowell. The half-truth worked. Security whispered into earpieces, uncertain how to handle a well-dressed attorney claiming business with the groom. In the confusion, I slipped inside. The ballroom took my breath away. Thousands of white orchids, crystal chandeliers casting rainbow light, 400 guests in couture and judgment. At the altar, Brandon stood in a tuxedo that cost more than my car, smiling at a blonde in silk and innocence. I moved down the side aisle, invisible in the shadows until I wasn't. The officiant was mid-sentence about the sanctity of marriage when I stepped into the center aisle. I object. 400 heads turned. Brandon's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and horror. The bride, barely 25, all trust fund and good intentions, looked between us. I object, I repeated, my voice carrying like I was arguing before the Supreme Court. Because Brandon Lowell abandoned his children to marry into political power. And someone should tell the truth before more vows are broken. Loretta shot from her seat like an avenging angel in Armani. Security! Mrs. Lowell, I smiled at my former mother-in-law. So lovely to see you again. Though I'm disappointed you didn't invite your grandsons to their father's wedding, especially on their birthday. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The bride's face went white. Brandon? She's lying, he managed, but his voice cracked. This woman is disturbed. We divorced years ago because she couldn't have children? I pulled out my phone, projecting photos onto the massive screen meant for their wedding slideshow. Meet Elias and Silas Lowell, 3 years old today. Your sons. The photos told everything. 2 boys with Brandon's eyes and stubborn chin. Birth certificates naming him as father. The divorce decree he'd signed while I was secretly pregnant. You knew? The bride's voice was small, broken. Senator Morrison stood, his political smile sharp as glass. This is a private family matter. No. The bride, Cassandra, pulled off her veil. Did you know? Brandon's silence was admission enough. Cassie, baby, let me explain. But she was already running, silk train trailing like shed skin. Her father followed, barking orders about damage control. The room erupted, guests filming on phones, security advancing. And in the chaos, Brandon finally looked at me. Really looked. They're mine? He whispered. They were never yours, I said. You gave them up the day you chose your mother's money over your wife's humanity. They're mine. Only mine. Loretta grabbed his arm. Don't listen to her. She's nobody. We'll demand tests, fight custody. With what grounds? A new voice asked. Raphael stepped from behind a column, and my heart stopped. He wore a judge's expression and held official papers. What are you doing here? I breathed. Making sure you're safe. He handed the papers to Brandon. Restraining order. You go near Dr. Clark or the children, you'll be arrested. And before you threaten legal action, know that I'm Federal Judge Rafael Moreno presiding over family court. Any custody battle will go through me. He'd never told me. All those dinners, all that careful friendship, and he'd been protecting us with more power than I'd known existed. Loretta laughed, brittle as old bones. A judge? How convenient. Tell me, Your Honor, are you fucking her? Is that why? Mrs. Lowell. Raphael's voice could have frozen hell. Dr. Clark has rebuilt her life with dignity after your family's cruelty. She's asked for nothing except to be left alone. Continue harassing her, and I'll personally ensure you face charges for witness intimidation, based on the threatening conversation you had with her 3 years ago. Yes, we have recordings. I stared at him. This man who'd spent 3 years quietly building a fortress around us. Raphael, not now, he murmured. Let's get you home to your boys. We left them there, Brandon surrounded by the wreckage of his wedding, Loretta shrieking about lawsuits, 400 witnesses to the truth they'd tried to bury. In the parking garage, I collapsed against my car, adrenaline fading to exhaustion. Raphael caught me, solid and real. You knew, I said. You've been a federal judge this whole time. Temporarily appointed, and yes. He brushed hair from my face with infinite gentleness. My father was friends with yours. He asked me to look after you, but I stayed for my own reasons. Which are? His smile was answer enough. Let's go home. The boys are making birthday cake, and I promised them you'd be back for candles. Home, where my children waited, where love wasn't conditional on fertility or social standing, where a patient man had spent 3 years proving that some people know how to love right. The Lowell name had no power there. The video went viral before we reached Connecticut. Georgetown wedding explodes when first wife reveals secret children. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone had hundreds of messages. Reporters, colleagues, strangers who'd found my work email. The internet had opinions about everything from my dress choice to my parenting. Inside, the twins were covered in chocolate frosting, their birthday cake more abstract art than dessert. They launched themselves at me, sticky hands and pure joy. Mama, we made cake. Uncle Raffi helped, but we did the frosting ourselves. I held them tight, inhaling sugar and safety. These boys who didn't know their world had shifted, that their father's name was trending on Twitter alongside words like scandal and abandonment. It's perfect, I said, meaning more than cake. Raphael helped settle them for bed, worn out from birthday excitement. I found him later on my front steps, sleeves rolled up, watching New Haven sleep. Federal judge, I said, settling beside him. That's quite a secret. Temporary appointment while Judge Harrison recovered from surgery. I'm back to teaching next month. He glanced at me. I should have told you. Why didn't you? Because you needed a friend, not another powerful man making promises. His voice carried old pain. My ex-wife married me for my father's connections. When she realized I wanted to teach instead of playing politics, she left. I know what it's like to be someone's disappointment. We sat in comfortable silence while truth settled between us like snow. The media will be brutal, he warned. The Morrison family has reach. They'll try to spin this. He was right. By morning, the narrative had split. Half the internet championed me as a hero single mother. The other half painted me as a vindictive ex-wife who'd ruined Washington's wedding of the year. Brandon's team released a statement. Mr. Lowell was unaware of any children and questions their paternity. He's devastated by this malicious attack on his character and new marriage. Except there was no new marriage. Cassandra Morrison had filed for annulment before the reception ended. 3 days later, Brandon appeared on my doorstep. No lawyers, no Loretta, just him in jeans and humility, looking like the man I'd fallen in love with a lifetime ago. Don't, I said through the barely opened door. I just want to see them. You had 3 years. You blocked my calls. Your mother threatened to destroy me if I contacted you. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. I started to close the door, but his hand stopped it. Vanessa, please. They're my sons. Biologically. The word tasted like victory and venom. But you're not their father. Fathers show up. Fathers fight. Fathers don't slap their wives for having medical conditions. He flinched at the reminder. I was wrong. About everything. Mother said, I don't care what Loretta said. You're a grown man who made choices. Live with them. I'll fight for custody. Try it. Raphael appeared behind me, legal shield and casual clothes. Your signed abandonment papers. 3 years of no contact or support. Domestic violence reports. Good luck finding a judge who'll give you anything beyond supervised visitation, if that. Brandon studied Raphael, understanding dawning. You love her. More than you ever did, Raphael said simply. The truth of it hung between us all. Brandon nodded slowly, defeat aging him 10 years. Take care of them, he said. And for once, I believed he meant it. He left without fighting. The man who'd discarded us for a 3% chance had become the 3% himself, a statistical improbability in my children's lives. Inside, I found Elias and Silas building block towers, blissfully unaware of the drama outside. Mama, look! Silas held up his creation. It's a courthouse, like where you work. It's beautiful, baby. Uncle Raffi says courthouses are where people go to find fare, Elias added seriously. Is that true? I thought of all the women I'd helped find justice, of Brandon's retreat. of Raphael standing guard over the family we'd built from broken pieces. Sometimes, I said. But the really important fair happens when people choose to do what's right, even when it's hard. They nodded sagely and returned to building. I watched them work. These miracles who'd arrived against all odds. They'd never have the Lowell fortune, but they had something worth more. A mother who'd crossed fire for them and a man who'd waited 3 years to love them right. The media storm would pass. Brandon would fade to footnotes in their story. But we'd remain. The woman who'd refused to disappear, the boys who were worth everything, and the patient judge who'd proved that some love doesn't come with conditions. January arrived with subpoenas and snow. Loretta Lowell, in her infinite wisdom, had decided to sue for grandparental rights. The media ate it up. Billionaire matriarch fights for secret grandsons. She can't be serious, I said, staring at the legal papers. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia Chen, who'd taken the case pro bono, smiled grimly. She's hemorrhaging money and reputation. The Lowell Company stock dropped 12% after the wedding fiasco. This is damage control. Using my children. Using the grandchildren she threatened to destroy, Patricia corrected. We have the recording Raphael mentioned. She's finished. The recording? Raphael had revealed that during one of his visits 3 years ago, I'd been wearing a department-issued recording device from a domestic violence case. It had captured Loretta's threats perfectly, inadmissible in criminal court but gold in family proceedings. Brandon stayed silent through it all, hidden in whatever hole men crawl into when their mothers' empires crumble. Cassandra Morrison had given interviews painting him as a manipulator who'd hidden his past. His real estate firm quietly removed his name from the letterhead. The trial began on a Tuesday that felt like reckoning. Media crowded the New Haven courthouse steps. Inside, Loretta sat in Chanel and delusion, her lawyer arguing that grandparents had rights regardless of past misunderstandings. Then Patricia played the recording. Loretta's voice filled the courtroom. If you come here again, if you contact my son, if you breathe a word of this desperate lie to anyone, I'll bury you in legal fees. I'll make sure you never teach again. The judge, not Raphael, who'd recused himself, listened stone-faced as 3 years of threats echoed off marble walls. Your client threatened a pregnant woman, she said finally. Denied her the right to inform the father, used wealth and influence to separate children from their biological parent. And now she wants access to those same children? Loretta's lawyer scrambled. People say things in anger. This wasn't anger. This was calculated cruelty. The judge turned to me. Dr. Clark, do you have anything to add? I stood, thinking of all the women I'd represented who'd been silenced by power and money. Loretta Lowell taught me something valuable. She said women who can't bear children aren't really wives. But I did bear children. I bore them alone, raised them alone, loved them through every milestone she chose to miss. If that doesn't make me a real mother, I don't know what does. But I am their grandmother, Loretta burst out. Blood matters. Does it? I asked. Where was blood when I was pregnant and scared? Where was blood during midnight feedings, first words, scary dreams? My neighbor, Mrs. Haddad, has been more of a grandmother than you. Rafael's abuela teaches them Spanish and makes them flan. Blood didn't show up. Love did. The courtroom fell silent. Even Loretta's lawyer seemed affected. The judge ruled swiftly. No grandparental rights. A permanent restraining order. And in a twist that made headlines, she recommended investigation into Loretta's business practices, noting that someone who'd threaten a pregnant woman might threaten others. Loretta left in handcuffs 2 months later on embezzlement charges. The Lowell empire collapsed like it had been built on sand and spite. Brandon disappeared entirely. Rumors placed him in California, starting over with a new name and old shame. Through it all, my boys thrived. They started pre-K at a Montessori school where no one cared about their last name. They learned to write their letters and question everything. Mama, Elias asked one evening, are we ever going to have a dad? I was washing dishes, Raphael reading on the couch. We'd fallen into this rhythm. Dinner together, bedtime stories shared, careful navigation of something unnamed but undeniable. "What makes someone a dad?" I asked. Silas piped up. "They teach you stuff, like Uncle Raffi taught us to ride bikes. And they fix boo-boos," Elias added, "and make pancakes on Saturday." "And they love your mama," Silas said with 4-year-old certainty. "That's the most important part." I glanced at Raphael, who'd gone very still behind his book. "Well then," I said carefully, "maybe you should ask Uncle Raffi if he wants the job." Both boys turned to Raphael with identical expressions of hope. He set down his book, eyes suspiciously bright. "I would be honored," he said simply. They launched themselves at him, all knobby elbows and pure joy. Over their heads, Raphael looked at me with a question in his eyes. "I love you," I mouthed. His smile could have lit cities. "About time," he mouthed back. We'd started as strangers bound by crisis, became friends through careful trust. Now we stood on the edge of something that felt like forever. Not because biology demanded it, but because love did. The Lowells had taught me that blood could betray. But Raphael, Mrs. Haddad, Zoe, Patricia, they'd taught me that family could be chosen, built from dedication and faith and showing up when showing up was hard. Loretta was right about one thing. I hadn't been a real wife to Brandon. I'd been too real for a man who preferred convenient fictions. 3 years later, I stood before an audience of 1,000 at the New Haven Convention Center. My hands didn't shake anymore when I spoke. The woman who'd once begged for scraps of affection now commanded rooms. "My ex-mother-in-law once told me that women who can't have children aren't real wives," I began. She was wrong about the first part, but accidentally right about the second. I wasn't meant to be just someone's wife. I was meant to be someone. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Behind me, the cover of my book blazed on the screen. Breaking to Become, A Mother's Journey from Abandonment to Abundance. The book had started as therapy, pouring pain onto pages late at night. Raphael would find me writing at 3 a.m., bring tea, rub shoulders that carried too much. "Tell it all," he'd urged. "Other women need to know they're not alone." Now it sat on the New York Times bestseller list. Movie rights optioned. Translation deals in 12 languages. But more importantly, it had become a lifeline for women navigating their own betrayals. Miracle Mothers had grown from support group to national movement. Chapters in 40 cities, legal aid, counseling, emergency housing. We'd helped thousands of women rebuild after men who'd promised forever delivered only devastation. In the audience, I spotted familiar faces. Patricia Chen, who'd become our chief legal counsel. Mrs. Haddad, who ran our Boston chapter with iron will and limitless love. Zoe, who'd moved back to lead our medical advocacy program. And in the front row, my family. Raphael in his professor blazer, proud as sunrise. Elias and Silas, 7 now and wearing matching bow ties they'd insisted on, fidgeting but trying so hard to be good. "The miracles in my life," I continued, "aren't just my sons, though they did arrive against 3% odds. The real miracle was discovering that breaking apart revealed who I was meant to become." The speech flowed like water now. I told them about nights on Zoe's couch, about frozen peas on bruised cheeks, about choosing hope when evidence suggested foolishness, about a man who'd waited 3 years to say "I love you" because he wanted to mean it completely. We're often told that strong women don't need help. That's another lie. Strong women build networks. They accept casseroles from neighbors and midnight phone calls from friends. They let good men prove that goodness exists. They understand that independence doesn't mean isolation. As I spoke, I caught sight of someone in the back, a ghost in an expensive suit. Brandon looked older, smaller somehow. He stood apart from the crowd, watching his sons with an expression I couldn't read. I'd wondered if this would happen. Success has a way of drawing the past forward. But I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, not even satisfaction. He was just a stranger who shared DNA with my children. "I'll leave you with this," I concluded. "You are not broken because someone couldn't love you right. You are not worthless because someone assessed your value incorrectly. You are not alone because someone left. You are becoming, and becoming is beautiful. Standing ovation, thunderous applause. But I only had eyes for my boys, who broke protocol to run on stage. "Mama, you were amazing!" Silas shouted. "Did we do good sitting still?" Elias asked. "It was really hard." "You were perfect," I assured them, scooping them close. Raphael joined us, his hand finding the small of my back. We'd married quietly last spring, just family and chosen family in Mrs. Haddad's backyard. The twins had been ring bearers and speech givers, telling everyone how they'd picked Raphael for our dad because he was the best at loving Mama. As we left the stage, Brandon approached. Security moved to intercept, but I waved them off. He looked at the boys who pressed closer to Raphael. "They're remarkable," he said simply. "Yes, He stopped, started again. "I'm sorry, for all of it. You deserved better." "I got better," I said, meaning it. "I hope you find the same." He nodded, understanding this was goodbye. No dramatics, no pleas, just a man finally comprehending the price of his choices. He left without asking for more than I'd given. "Who was that?" Elias asked. "Someone from a long time ago," I said. "Nobody important." And he wasn't. Not anymore. The important people surrounded us. Raphael discussing baseball with the boys, Zoe planning our celebration dinner, Patricia fielding interview requests. My phone buzzed with messages from women who'd heard the speech and felt seen. Tomorrow, I'd answer each one. Tonight, I'd go home with my family to the Victorian we'd bought last year, with its wraparound porch and rooms full of laughter. The boys would demand Raphael's pancakes for dinner because celebration breakfast for dinner was a tradition now. We'd read stories in the pillow fort they'd never quite taken down. I'd fall asleep between Raphael and scattered Legos, surrounded by proof that the best families are built from devotion, not DNA. I'd been diagnosed as broken, discarded as worthless, threatened into silence. But here I stood, mother, wife, advocate, author. A woman who'd learned that 3% wasn't about statistics. It was about refusing to let other people's limitations define your possibilities. Loretta had been wrong about everything except one detail. I hadn't been a wife in the way she understood. I'd been waiting to become something more. A woman who belonged to herself first, and chose to share that self with people who saw her value. The twins raced ahead toward our car, Raphael chasing with elaborate monster noises. 7 years ago, I'd left Boston with nothing but a suitcase and shame. Now I had everything that mattered. Children who knew their worth, work that changed lives, and love that came without conditions. Some women are born to greatness. Others have it beaten into them by people too small to recognize the divine. Either way, we rise. We rise, and we bring others with us. That's our legacy. That's our miracle. That's enough.